Hello everyone. I am Dr. Susengfa Gogoi, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, North Lakhimpur College, Autonomous, Assam. Welcome you all with another module on your favorite channel, e-Politica. Everything that you want to know on political science. The title of today's module is Introduction of Democratic Politics and Capitalism in Post-Communist Regimes, Shock Therapy and Aftermath. So this module has also been prepared in Assamese. So those who want to see this module in Assamese, link has been given in the description. The objective of today's module is to learn the changing world order in post-communist regime, to understand the meaning of shock therapy, to estimate the major concepts of shock therapy, to evaluate the consequences of shock therapy. So this particular module has been prepared in connection with the class 12 political science syllabus, and this has been in connection with the previous module, that is module number 13. Let us begin. With the collapse of communism or end of communism, in most of the countries which were earlier under the regime of communism, for example Russia, Central Asia and East Europe, these countries were under a painful process of transition from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system. So this shift from one political system to another has been considered as the grand shift. Now when we talk about the grand shift, there were two alternative features were available to these newly emerged countries which were otherwise put under authoritarian socialist system, were democracy and capitalism. Therefore, with the end of communism, we see that there was also a growth of democracy and capitalism. Now, how that change had been achieved? For the establishment of democracy, it was seen that from one party dominant political system, there was a shift towards a multi-party system. And for the realization of capitalism, it was seen that from a closed door economy, these countries were shifted towards rapid market economy system. Now when you talk about establishment of democracy, the situation that was possible or that happened in these countries of Central Asia, Russia and East Europe had been very beautifully theorized by political philosopher Francis Fukuyama in his article The End of History. So this particular article called The End of History, which was later published as a book with the title End of History and the Last Man. In the book, Fukuyama had suggested for an alternative political future after the collapse of Soviet Union or the end of Cold War. He said that after the end of Cold War, the only future that is available for the newly emerged country and the others is liberal democracy. He argued that since there was no competition, there was no conflict, so no history to be written. So history, according to him, had come to an end with the end of competition between United States of America and Soviet Union, and by and large the bloc represented by them. Therefore, according to him, the political system which was to be accepted by the countries was the liberal democracy. Simultaneously, there was also a growth of a debate whether to accept parliamentarism as an alternative future to the presidentialism. So we can call it as presidentialism versus parliamentarism. As you all know, that under this authoritarian socialist system, prior to the collapse of Soviet Union, the political system was mostly known as presidential form of a government. And this presidential form of a government were not a popular political system because they were more dominant, more authoritarian in character. Therefore, the newly emerged country had suggested for accepting parliamentarism as an alternative future to the presidentialism. Regarding capitalism, we saw that with the collapse of Soviet Union, there was a complete shift, total shift towards a capitalist economy from the socialist economy. And the cornerstone had been laid by the former president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, with his reform strategies such as price liberalization, ending subsidies, and privatizing industries. So Boris Yeltsin, he had adopted different strategies to reform the existing economic deadlocks of these countries, mostly of Russia. He wanted to liberalize the prices of the commodity. He wanted to end the government subsidies, and he had also suggested for a privatizing the industries which were earlier directed by the state. So that grain shift had been noticed. And when these grain shifts are occurring, it was seen that the countries who had required to make this total shift from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system, they were put under severe strain. The conditions of these countries suddenly was so frustrating, so negative, that they had to ask for some kind of suggestions to reform their economy and to reform the strain, the burden that was created with a sudden shift from a socialist economy to a democratic capitalist economy. There need a shock therapy. Therefore, the term shock therapy refers to the sudden release of price and currency controls, withdrawal of state subsidies, and immediate trade liberalization within a country. This process also includes the privatization on a wide range of public owned assets and businesses, and this is also considered to be a simple solution to improve a country's economy. Therefore, the government introduces different kinds of reforms to cut their losses and starts afresh. So therefore, shock therapy has been considered as one of the important mechanisms or processes to ease the sudden burden created due to a grand shift of an existing political system. And the same thing was also happened after the end of Cold War, especially after the end of Soviet collapse of Soviet Russia. Therefore, this particular model called the shock therapy, it was also to be considered as a model of economic transition in Russia, which was influenced by two prominent international economic institutions, World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and the process that was initiated by them had been called as shock therapy. So shock therapy is therefore nothing but a model of economic transition in Russia suggested by World Bank and International Monetary Fund. And now why do the shock therapy was introduced? It was introduced to eradicate the burden created by communism and to establishment of capitalism swiftly. The policy of stabilization, privatization, and liberalization were chosen to implement the shock therapy. So how that shock therapy was implied? To imply the shock therapy, it was seen that policy of stabilization, privatization, and liberalization were adopted in Russia. Now what is policy of stabilization? Policy of stabilization basically means to make the economy of Russia a stable economy, because it was seen that prior to the collapse of Soviet Russia, the economy of Soviet Russia was doomed due to its over expenses for military requirements and for its over expenses and corruption charges by the government. Therefore, to stabilize the doomed economy of Russia, shock therapy was required. This is number one. Number two, prior to the shock therapy, the entire organizations, industries, companies were under the control of the state. So there was a state-owned kind of economy. So for the implementation of shock therapy, privatization was given utmost priority. And this shock therapy was also implied by the adoption of the policy of liberalization. By liberalization, it basically means that the economy of Russia, which was closed door and which was based on an import substitution, to be liberalized. The market need to be opened up for the goods and services from other countries. So that liberalization was also used for apply shock therapy. As part of such initiatives, on January 2, 1992, Russian President Boris Yeltsin, he had ordered for liberalization of foreign trade, prices and currency. So it was Boris Yeltsin who had been given the responsibility, who had the responsibility to reform or overcome Russian doomed economy from the shock created by the shift from a socialist economy to a democratic capitalist economy. But as a result of this shock therapy, 85% of Russian small enterprises and 82,000 of state enterprises were privatized. So as a result of the shock therapy and the initiatives made by Boris Yeltsin, a total of 85% of Russian small enterprises and 82,000 state enterprises were being privatized. Now, what was desired of shock therapy? Now, why the shock therapy was needed? The shock therapy was needed for certain reasons. Number one, to control the hyperinflation. As we have seen that during the last part of Cold War, that is from 85 to probably 1990, it was seen that there was a growth of hyperinflation. Hyperinflation basically means rise of prices of commodities. So when the prices of the commodities had rise into a maximum level, it had created a situation of hyperinflation. So to control the situation of hyperinflation, the shock therapy was desired. The shock therapy was also desired to control the shortages of goods and services in Russia and its allied countries. The shock therapy was also desired to jumpstart the economic production. As we saw that with the end of Cold War from 85 to 90, the economy of Russia was completely doomed. There was no production. The GDP was very low. So the economy was completely stopped for a time being. So therefore, that stopped economy to have to start up this economic production, the shock therapy was desired. And with the end of economy or the dooming of economy in Russia, the rise of unemployment was also very high. So to reduce the unemployment, the shock therapy was desired. And also to improve the standard of living. In the previous module, when we had talked about the causes of collapse of Soviet Russia, I told you that one of the important reasons of collapse of Soviet Russia was the standard of living of people. It was seen that people had to adjust only with the basic requirements. So the life of the people the standard of life or standard of living of people in Russia was very low. So to improve the standard of living, the shock therapy was all desired. But the effects of shock therapy seemed to be negative in Russia. Now, what were the effects of shock therapy? Although the shock therapy was actually desired to speed up the economy, to intensify the changing economic and political order in Soviet Russia, but the effects were actually different than it was desired. Now, what were the effects of shock therapy? Let us discuss. Number one, Russia, whose 90% of the industries or industrial complexes were completely controlled by the state. After the use of shock therapy or apply of shock therapy, it was seen that 90% of its industries were being privatized, or those had been sold to the hands of private individuals and companies. So that shows a serious or remarkable change in the economic situation of Russia. So earlier it was the industries were under the control of the state, but with the apply of shock therapy, it was seen that 90% of Russian industries were being owned by private individuals and companies. Another effect of shock therapy was it created the largest garage sale in history. Student, please mark these particular words. The largest garage sale in history. Now, what is this largest garage sale in history? Now, whenever you have to buy something from a market, the prices of new products and the prices of old or used products are always different. Suppose uh, for your computer, suppose you require a particular part or a software or a hardware for your computer, and if you go to buy it from a shop, the cost would be different. And if you visit a computer mechanic or computer repairer, and if you asked him if he had a used part of that particular same product, if he had, then he could have sell it in a more minimal price than it was desired from the market price. So that was it is seen that with the change in the economy, there was a largest garage sale in the history of political history of the world, which led to the virtual disappearance of entire industries, for the restructuring was carried out by market forces in place of government owned policies. Hence, industries were undervalued and sold at a throw-away prices. So it was a very serious kind of a situation, because earlier the entire market arrangements were controlled by the government owned policies, but when the economy was handed to the market forces, so the old industries had left no choice other than to sell it to the private individuals and companies in a very low price than it actually deserved. So therefore it was called as the largest garage sale in the history. So that was also another effect of shock therapy. Thirdly, the shock therapy had also systematically destroyed the old system of social welfare. Now, as we all know that one of the important agendas or one of the important characteristics of a socialist economy is to give social welfare to the public. But with the coming up of capitalism, the traditional social welfare mechanism of Russia or the Eastern European country had got changed or destroyed due to the shock therapy. Fourthly, the value of ruble, the Russian currency, it had declined dramatically due to the high rate of inflation, and real GDP of Russia also declined between 1989 to 1999. So in one decade, from 89 to 99, it was seen that the value of ruble is in Russian currency, it got declined. And why it was declined? It was declined due to the rate of inflation, that is rising of prices, and due to the real GDP of Russia. That means the gross domestic product was very low of Russia. That's why the value of ruble also got declined. And it was because of the adoption of shock therapy. Number 5, the withdrawal of government subsidies pushed large section of society into poverty. So it was another very important kind of a effects, where it was seen that due to the withdrawal of government subsidies, earlier the government had different subsidized programs for the public, and when these subsidized programs have been withdrawn, a large sections of society, they were forced to become poor, or they were forced to face poverty. And it was also interestingly seen that amidst this economic crisis, there was a growth of emergence of a mafia raj who started controlling many economic activities of Russia, and all of these were the product of the shock therapy. Number 6, it is also noticed that due to the growth of privatization, there was a new disparity among people had been noticed. So people were categorized or divided in Russia as rich and poor, and which created a sense of economic inequality in Russia. So the growing economic inequality in Russia was another important effect of shock therapy. Number 7, Earlier, one of the important economic practice which was seen in Russia was the community farming system. With the withdrawal of this community farming system, it was seen that there was cases of food insecurity among the people had been noticed. And when this food insecurity were happening, there was a crisis of production of crops. To meet the requirement, the Russian government, they need to depend on import of necessary items from the other countries. So the self-sufficient economy based on some conventional practices like community farming, it got disturbed due to the shock therapy. So by and large, shock therapy, therefore, it brought a ruin to the economy and put disaster upon people to the entire region of Eastern Europe and Russia. Therefore, the shock therapy had more negative implications in Russia than positive. So this is all about today's module. Thank you all for watching the video. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to reach me at susengfa@nlc.ac.in. You're watching e-Politica, everything that you want to know on political science. I will come again with another module on an issue of political science. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.